Hey, good morning, everyone joining us live. Thank you so much. We appreciate it a great deal. Thanks to everybody on YouTube and Facebook who are watching the recordings. Good afternoon, good evening, good night, whatever time of day it is for you. Thank you again to everyone who is liking, subscribing, and sharing. We are so grateful for your help in doing the easy stuff. If you think this is valuable, if you want more people to see it, we appreciate you liking, subscribing, and sharing to help us get the word out. All right, so today it's My Empowered Political Life. It's Thursday, April 17th, Anno Domini 2025. And we are going to talk about today the bad GOP budget. Now, federal fiscal policy might seem tedious, it might seem boring. We're going to try and make it a little bit interesting today. As many of you know, my name is Ian Foster, and I am a business and tax lawyer. I spent many decades inside government, law, and politics, and I do have some expertise in government fiscal policy. So we are going to, and excuse me, it's springtime and the pollen is falling off the trees outside. I'm really sorry. I'm very sneezy this morning. It's that time of year. It's springtime. It's beautiful outside, but the cost I pay for the beauty outside right now are the allergies. So apologize for that. So let's talk a little bit about the upcoming budget and some federal fiscal policy. See if we can make it a little bit interesting and help us all understand the important implications of what's going on. So, if you're not familiar, Congress has failed to pass any long-term budget in many years. It's been a long time, and this is not just a Republican issue, it's a Democrat issue and a Republican issue. It's an issue with everybody who's been in charge of Congress over the last 10 years. They are really bad at passing any sort of long-term budgeting and spending plans. This is hard for the economy. It makes it hard for businesses to plan. It makes it hard for government to plan, makes it hard for the military to plan. So we need to get back to a point where we were when Congress can once again pass some long-term budgets and spending appropriations bills. So rather than having any sort of long-term budgets, the government right now is kept open and kept running on a series of quote continuing resolutions or CRs. That's what we call them, the continuing resolutions. And these CRs last anywhere from 3 to 6 months at a time. Again, you can see how it's hard for the military to plan, it's hard for business to plan, it's hard for government to plan, it's hard for regular folks to plan if the government is kept running on 3 to 6 month resolutions rather than a long-term budget. And I'm not a big fan of both sidesism, but this is a both sidesism issue. This is Democrats and Republicans have had a hard time, both of them, for a long time passing any sort of long-term spending and tax plans in the government. This is something that needs to get fixed. Right now, as you know, Congress has a GOP majority in both houses, the House and the Senate. The GOP, just like the Democrats before them, have been unable to pass a real budget due to infighting in their ranks. They can't agree on anything. And this is the same thing when the Democrats were in charge a few years ago. They couldn't agree either. Nobody seems to be able to agree. Now, recently, just this week, they passed a framework for a budget, and here's how that framework works. We call it a budget resolution. First, they pass the budget resolution. The budget resolution is like the framework of a house. It's like when you build a house and you have the frame, but the rooms are empty, the walls are empty. It's just the frame of the house. You know where the rooms are, you know how big the house is going to be, you know roughly the size of each room. It's the framework for a house. That's a budget resolution. And then after a budget resolution, then you start to pass the actual tax and spending bills to flesh out the framework. The tax and spending bills are like the furniture in the house, the electronics, the appliances, the things that flesh it out and make the house real. So right now we still do not have we don't have the furniture, we don't have the appliances, we don't have the electronics. All we have is the framework of the House from the GOP budget resolution. Now, the House and Senate had passed different resolutions. So the House framework included a lot of tax cuts, mostly for the very wealthy, amounting to about $4.5 trillion over 10 years in tax cuts, a $1 trillion annual defense budget, which is about a 10% increase from where we are now in our defense budget, and about 880 billion in cuts to Medicare and Medicaid, plus some unspecified cuts to SNAP. SNAP, if you're not familiar, is supplemental nutritional assistance program, food stamps, basically. We used to call these things food stamps or other terms. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry. The pollen today. It's really getting to me. It's all good. Beautiful outside, so I'm grateful. Now, the Senate framework was a little different. The Senate framework had tax cuts, again, mostly for the very wealthy, amounting to 5.3 trillion over 10 years, so larger tax cuts. Again, the 1 trillion annual defense budget. And then the Senate framework, the big difference was they have no spending cuts. Under the Senate framework, they are not cutting anything to offset the cost of these tax cuts. So it has an even bigger effect on the deficit. Why did the Senate framework have no spending cuts? I think because senators, especially those who are up for re-election in tough districts or swing districts, realize that those spending cuts are very unpopular. So the Senate framework had no spending cuts. Congress has, at least for now, adopted the Senate framework. So the House passed theirs, the Senate passed theirs, and then it went back to the House, and Mike Johnson strong armed. Mike Johnson, if you don't know, he's our Speaker of the House right now. He strong armed the Senate version through. So right now we are looking at adopting the Senate version. But let's look at some of the consequences of this. First, I'm going to show you some charts. These charts are going to seem complicated. They're really not. We tend to look at things, federal spending, federal debt, federal taxes, as a percentage of GDP. Do you all remember what GDP means? It means gross domestic product. So, gross domestic product or GDP is a measure of our nation's total economic output. It tries to take into account as much as it can. It's our total economic output. So we tend to measure all these things. As a old government lawyer myself, I can tell you we measure these things as percentages of GDP because that makes sure we are comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges. As GDP goes up or down, that affects whether we can spend more or less, whether we can tax more or less. So we tend to measure all these things as a percentage of GDP to make sure the measure is consistent. So that blue line there, the reconciliation bill, takes our debt, our national debt from right now it's about 97, 98% of GDP, which means right now our national debt is almost as big as the nation's entire economic output, up to about 125%. If we just stuck with current law, it would be less, 117%, which is still too much. And then the reconciliation bill with, you see where it says claimed economic feedback? The House of Representatives is claiming that their tax cuts are going to spur the economy, which will result in higher revenue and less debt. Now, we'll get back to this in a minute. There is very little evidence for that being the case. We have a lot of historical evidence to say that sort of thing is not the case. But they are claiming that the debt increase is much less. But even under their claimed debt increase, we have a massive increase in the national debt over the next 10 years. At some point, this is going to become unsustainable. Now, the Senate version, when we look at this, start with the bottom line there. CBO is Congressional Budget Office. Their baseline debt shows that even if we change nothing right now, over the next 30 years, we are going from our debt being almost 100% of our GDP to 156% of GDP. Again, that means our national debt, if we stay on our current course and change nothing, our national debt will be 156% of our nation's entire economic output. Now, I'm not saying we should have no national debt. In fact, I think we should because US treasuries provide an amazing source of soft power for the United States. But 156% of GDP, that means our entire output is going to just paying off debt at that point. And then under the Senate budget instructions, it goes up to 211% of GDP, meaning twice our national economic output is servicing debt. And then if you make those Senate budget instructions permanent, it gets even higher from there. So we are looking again at a massive increase in the national debt that at some point we won't be able to pay back. All right, so I wanted to show you real quickly the interest we're paying on national debt as a percentage of our GDP. This is just right now. So that circle over there, I've highlighted that spike over the last couple of years. So now 3% of our nation's entire economic output, or remember, GDP is our nation's entire economic output. 3% of that now is going to pay off interest on the national debt, not even paying off the national debt, just the interest on the debt. is starting to eat up a huge percentage of our nation's economic output. And some of those years were under Democratic administrations, and some of them are under Republican. Again, this is a problem that both parties are completely ignoring as the national debt gets to a point where we might not be able to pay it off anymore. I want to show you here just over the last 2 weeks, and this explains why the interest payments are so important. So this is U.S. 10-year treasuries. So U.S. 10-year treasury rates, that's the most common treasury rate for U.S. bonds that finance our national debt. Look at this spike just over the last week. See that spike there? That means our government is now paying more in interest than it was just a few weeks ago. This is mostly a result as the Trump tariff regime has gone into effect, and foreign nations and foreign companies have started to dump our US treasuries onto the market, which makes the interest rates on those treasuries go up, which makes our national debt much more difficult to finance. And so over the next 10 years, we're looking at an additional $1.1 trillion just in interest payments on our debt, because neither party is taking this seriously. At some point, somebody's got to take this seriously. Again, I think the national debt we can have a national debt, that's fine. We can have a deficit, that's fine. We can sell treasuries to finance our government. That gives the treasuries give us soft power around the world because they're supposed to be the safest asset in the world. But at some point, the bill is going to come due, and we may have to calm this down. Now, Congress right now, if you call up your members of Congress and say, "What's going on? Why are we doing this?" They're going to pretend it's not happening. Literally, they're going to pretend it's not happening. They are pretending it's not real. They are claiming the tax cuts will lead to economic growth, which will raise tax revenue and lower the debt. Now, again, the historical evidence for this is dubious at best. As a former government tax lawyer, I could tell you there is very little historical evidence to show that tax cuts lead to that sort of economic growth. It's just not what happens. It can under some circumstances, but our tax rates are actually very low right now by historical standards. So lowering them further, there's really no reason to believe from an evidence perspective it's going to increase our economic growth. It's no reason to believe it's going to raise tax revenue by lowering our rates. And at the same time, remember, they not only withdrew the new IRS funding. Remember, last year we had new IRS funding that was going to put IRS staffing levels back to where they were in 2000. They were just trying to put staffing levels back to where they were 25 years ago. They withdrew that funding, and the administration and Congress are now cutting 25% of the IRS workforce. Now, if you're wondering how does cutting revenue collectors raise revenue, that's a great question. And I have that same question. Cutting revenue collectors does not raise revenue. Cutting revenue collectors means we collect less. So there's no reason to believe we're going to collect more money. They are also pretending the tax cuts don't cost anything. Their argument is these are just an extension of existing cuts rather than something new. So they are in that sense, they are pretending they cost nothing. The analogy I think of here is, let's say you lease a car for $300 a month, and that lease is going to be up next month. So then you tell yourself, well, I'll just lease another car at $300 a month, and it won't cost me anything because I'm already paying 300, except it will cost you $300 a month. You will have to write a check for $300 a month. It will still cost you money. That's the sort of gimmick they're using to pretend that this stuff is not happening. Again, smash that like button, subscribe, share with your friends and family if you think people can benefit from this. We love your help, and we are super grateful for every single person who has been helping us so far. So let's get to Doors and Corners.
Room. I kept telling him, I said, there's doors and corners, kid. If you don't clear the room, if you don't come in slow, that room will eat you.
Yeah, so we're going to come in slow like a good detective so that room does not eat us. We're going to look around doors and corners. So the GOP budget right now is skating under the radar. We are focused on a lot of the outrages and drama. The administration is openly breaking the law, exhibiting cruelty, deporting innocent people, ignoring court orders. We're focused on that. And while all that's happening, the GOP Congress is about to blow up the federal debt worse than it's ever been blown up before, even while they are cutting vital services. Things like Medicare, Medicaid, and SNAP, those things keep people alive. Medicare and Medicaid give health insurance to people who could otherwise never get health insurance so that they get health care. Otherwise, they die. SNAP literally puts food in the mouth of poor children. So they're going to cut funding for the programs that keep people alive while they are cutting taxes and blowing up the federal debt in a way that's going to cost our children and grandchildren down the road. And now your Congress members, they know this is not popular. Why do you think the Senate budget has no spending cuts? They know it's not popular. They know they have elections coming up. Some of them are in swing districts, swing states. So the current framework has the no spending cuts. Now, I think ultimately they will have to include some just under their own reconciliation rules. And I don't want to get into that deep into the weeds of federal budgeting process. But at some point, if they want the tax cuts, they will have to cut spending as well. So this is a situation where calling your members of Congress actually makes a difference, especially if your member is a Republican. A lot of times, calling your members makes little or no difference, but here they know they're doing something unpopular. They're doing something that makes them uncomfortable because even they don't really want to cut programs that keep people alive. So call your senator, call your member of the House, regardless of their party, but especially if they're a Republican, call them, overwhelm their phone lines, make sure they know that this is not what you want. Thanks, everyone. I will see you all tomorrow.